Hi, this is Seng here. Well, I'm not actually here in the flesh. I'm virtually here as I've been joking with Lynn and a few friends about attending the opening tonight. In reality, I'm somewhere in Croatia with a good mate of mine, Dave Harley. I'm location scouting to see whether Croatia might be a viable destination for a future venture photography tour, perhaps in the next couple of years or so. But in the meantime, here I am in my voice and in a number of portraits as well as a slideshow for tonight's opening of the Travel Collective exhibition at the Epson Print Gallery. I'd just like to start by giving a big thanks to Lynn Gale for being the organizational force behind this exhibition, getting us all together, five disparate photographers putting in their images on show tonight, and also to Big Ben Walton and Team Digital for being a driving force as well behind the collective themed exhibitions over the last couple of years. Ben especially is very dedicated to the photographic community in Perth, and I hope that you'll appreciate what he and Lynn have put in store for you tonight. Now, on to travel photography. Well, it's an interesting genre, isn't it? Because I think it's one of those all-encompassing genres in photography, in that you could be a landscape photographer and travel, and hence be a travel photographer, or you could be a portrait photographer and travel, and still call yourself a travel photographer. In fact, in some circles, it's jokingly said that everyone's a travel photographer these days because all you need is to travel, perhaps down to your local beach, take a photo, and you're a travel photographer. But for the purposes of tonight, obviously, we're going to kind of narrow the definition of travel photography and travel photographer a little bit more. Um, and I'll just talk a little bit about my own experiences as a travel photographer and what I get most out of this particular genre of travel photography. For me, travel photography is indeed cross genres in the sense that it's not limiting. It allows me to exercise a wide range of ways in which I can um, capture a sense of people, time, place, setting, culture, tradition, ceremony. The topics are so broad within travel photography that I think it's easy for anyone to find something that they enjoy photographing or some things that they enjoy photographing within this particular genre itself. For me, personally, travel photography began probably about 2002, so that's about 16, I think, years ago, when I did a very big solo backpacking trip through Europe. Um, and it was interesting taking a little point and shoot film Pentax camera on this trip because I initially used the camera to do the analog version of selfies, which was basically to position the camera on a wall, set it on a 5 or 10 second timer, move to position, and hope for goodness sakes that you haven't actually composed in such a way that it cropped off your head. So it started by basically creating shots of here I am at the Arc de Triomphe, and here I am at the Colosseum, and here I am at the Parthenon, and things like that, wherever I was traveling. But the more I experimented with photography during travel, the more I became interested in exploring the way in which I could tell a story in one or two images of a particular place, or more specifically about my experiences of a particular place. And I think when we travel and we tell stories of our travel, what we are essentially telling stories about is our own personal reactions and responses, our experiences of being at that particular place, of meeting certain people, of participating in certain events, whether they might be ceremonies or traditions, of observing the activities and practices of a particular culture. It's all filtered through our own kind of worldview. So the images that we produce while photographing during travel is quite often a very personal visualization of our response to the experience itself. And this became for me incredibly potent as an approach to photography, particularly when I spent a prolonged period of time in Greece, which is essentially my, I suppose, spiritual homeland in the sense that I always feel incredibly connected when I'm in Greece for some strange reason. I don't know whether I believe in reincarnation, but maybe I was, I don't know. Odysseus or something like that in a previous life. But anyway, um, when I was traveling around in Greece, I was traveling on my own, and as you do when you travel on your own, is that you end up becoming a lot more keenly aware of what you're seeing around. You don't have the distractions of having a spouse or a partner or friends to deal with. So you are completely connected with whatever it is that you're experiencing at that time and place. And for me, that connection became very powerful, and I began to photograph scenes and people and events and actions, just basically document my experiences in such a way that when I reviewed them in retrospect, they were very much a personal reaction to the intense sense of liberation and at the same time isolation that I felt by traveling solo for such an extended period of time. And when I published those images in a little book, a little photo book called Chaos and Drama, or Chaos Kai Drama, if you speak Greek, um, then it really did foreground the experience, the emotions that were going through me when I was traveling through Greece. So that little book and its images became for me a distillation of the sentiments, of the feelings, of the mood and emotions um, that I felt when I was doing that particular trip itself. So for me, travel photography will always have an emotive core to it, and I think that's always driven the way in which I approach travel photography. So in some respects, I think a lot of us, when we travel, try to get the postcard shot or something similar to that, the Lonely Planet shot, so to speak. And we're all guilty of it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but we all do it because we have seen these images and they represent what is quintessential travel photography for us. But for me personally, I think, and I'm hoping that this will be something that's personal for you as well if you travel and take photographs, is that the more powerful images are not the Lonely Planet images. They're not the postcard shots. They're not the selfies of you standing in front of the Arc de Triomphe. Um, they're more the intimate moments that you have managed to document and photograph. They're more the quiet scenes, the unique vistas, the exclusive moments that you have managed to capture or document with your photographic equipment. And that you've worked with in such a way that it becomes a representation of what that image means to you, simply because that image is itself a depiction of what you felt when you were there at that particular time and that particular place. So for me, travel photography has always come back to this very personal reaction, this very personal response to being at a specific place at a specific time and experiencing something incredibly specific in that regard there. So I have traveled very extensively since 2002, and in that 16 years, I think my vision and the way I visualize has changed a lot. I don't know whether I'd say that it's matured. Sometimes I look back to the works I produced, say in 2006 and 2008, and I go, why are they stronger than my works now? Why do they seem more pure than the works which I'm actually producing now? And when I think back about it, I think on some level, my vision, since I've sort of moved from the enthusiast frame of mind to a professional business owner type frame of mind, is that it begins to be colored or corrupted, if you like, by a kind of vision that I guess has a commercial sentiment to it. And I don't know whether this is necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different way of thinking and responding to a scene. So maybe it's not so much maturity, but a kind of realization that images need not necessarily always have to be snapshotishly innocent in that sense, but they can perhaps be a little bit more artistic, a little bit more considered. And maybe what I'm reacting to in terms of this quote unquote loss of innocence in my imaging is actually a more deliberate understanding and awareness in which light and composition plays in the making of an image. So it's always interesting to look back over your work as a retrospective in terms of seeing how it's evolved over time. I'd just like to take a little break here just to basically congratulate my co-exhibitors tonight. All of them are simply sensational photographers in their own right who travel extensively, especially Nicholas Marino, who I'm sure you know has spent a vast amount of time cycling around various parts of the world. One of the most isolated places in the world he's visited on his deadly treadly, his bicycle. Simply sensational guy. Mo Hosseini, Leah Kennedy, and Lynn Gale as well, for being part of this exhibition, for allowing me to join them in putting my works on show. And we hope that, and I hope that this is actually the beginning of further future collaborations between any or all of us. But back to back to travel photography here. I think in the images, in the 5 images that I've put on show here, they are very recent images. They were all taken in February this year in India. I was running the Colors of India photography tour this year with Lynn Gale, and we took a group of 7 photographers across India to a number of different locations. As tour leaders, it's actually difficult taking travel photographs because our attention is so fixed on making sure that our guests have a great time, have the best opportunity to engage with culture and traditions, and have the best opportunities to get great photographs from what it is that they're experiencing during that time. So much so that a lot of kind of photography that I end up doing when I'm leading a tour is quite tangential. It's the photography that happens after everyone's pretty much ready to go and happily taking their own photographs, and that's when I switch one part of my brain off, the part that basically says make sure everyone's happy, turn on the other slightly selfish part of my brain that says now let's visualize for yourself for a while, and then I'll basically have a little bit of a look around and see what it is in that scene that really engages me on that emotional and visual level. I find that the emotional and visual response is a very good driver to help you define what it is that draws you into the scene. If something doesn't actually engage with me emotionally, if it looks like it could be a nice postcard shot, but I don't engage with it emotionally, chances are I don't actually take a photograph of it, because for me it's taking time away from me looking for and connecting with something that will engage with me on that emotional level and that I will then want to take a photograph of. So I try not to be distracted by an expectation of what others think I should take a photograph of, and instead basically start to hone in my visualization, my vision, to look for things that really interest me. And quite often, more often than not really, that's about people doing something. So all my images in this exhibition are of people doing something. They're all candid or semi-candid photographs as well, in the sense that they're all observed images, bar a couple, I think, and even then they're only partially posed images. So what I do is, if I'm engaging with people, I'll engage with them and try to take photographs of them while they are engaging with me, while they are caught in a moment during that engagement, rather than a pose photograph. I think a pose photograph, even though I love pose portraits as a photographer, a pose travel portrait loses something of its spirit and of its essence to me, because it's no longer as open and honest in its documentation as, say, a candid image in that sense there. So I do enjoy finding these moments where I can actually photograph an emotion that's perhaps a little bit pure, and a moment that's very, very candid in that regard. So the images all come from that. There is an image here as well that you might look at and think, oh my goodness, that's really quite posed, and that's a man and woman on the steps. But it isn't. It's just about waiting there until the time is right. You know something's going to happen. It's just about waiting there, waiting for that right moment, and then basically firing off a few frames when you see it happen. Travel photography, like street photography, is about waiting. I think a lot of people treat street photography and travel photography as a bit of a photo walk. So there's this continuous walking and exploring and wandering at great speeds. And if you do that, you don't see as much, and you're not there when something interesting happens. So as I often tell people who come on these tours with me, once you find a location that's visually arresting, now it could be because the location's just exotic, or it could be because the light is brilliant. There could be several things happening in that particular setting that draws your eye, but it's just waiting for that one thing to nail the shot. Then stand there or sit there and wait, because it will happen. And when it happens, it's going to empower your image tenfold than what it was without that moment being in that picture itself. The other thing I'm often asked is, how do you photograph people? And I say, well, I just photograph people. People are people. And I guess a lot of that kind of nervousness about photographing people stems from our sort of slightly photophobic culture that we have here in the Western world, where photography and people with cameras are treated with a little bit of a suspicion, simply because we're not sure about their motivations in taking those photographs. And so as photographers, we become consumed by this sense of nervousness whenever we raise the camera to our eye and we want to actually take a photograph of a particular moment in time, which happens to have people in it. When you travel, I think because you're no longer intrinsically a part of the culture in which you are experiencing, a lot of that nervousness goes out the window. So for me, when I travel, it's really about just being there, being visibly there with as a photographer with your camera, being very visible in your photography, and acknowledging in some respects that some people don't want to have their photographs taken, which is fine, so you respect that, while other people are very open to having your photographs taken, and so you make use of that as a photographic opportunity. So in all of these images here, I was welcomed, whether implicitly or explicitly, to take photographs. And in each of these exhibited images, I was able to produce images simply just by being there, being very close to what's happening, being very close to the people, in many respects engaging with them, sometimes quite intensively, sometimes just very tacitly, so just a nod, a smile, a quick few snaps, another smile. You'll find that people are often very open to being photographed, even if they are, say, from Perth or WA, which has a little bit of a photophobic culture to it. If they're aware that you're there, if they acknowledge and accept your presence, and if they don't see you basically as being anything of a threat, so to speak, in that regards. So the onus on a travel photographer is to become that accepted personage, that personality that is welcomed tacitly with open arms by the people within the environment in which you're photographing. I'll leave you now to basically enjoy the exhibition, enjoy the food and wine that's been set out for you by Team Digital and Lynn, who's organized the exhibition. I'd like to thank you for coming to the opening night tonight. I'd like to congratulate Nico and Lynn and Mo and Leah as well for being part of this awesome exhibition here at Team Digital. I should be back in town by about mid-June-ish, hopefully. So looking forward to catching up with some of you then. In the meantime, have a great night, guys, and enjoy the show. Good night.